What Jeffrey didn't know when he stood up at my 50th work anniversary party and announced to 60 of my coworkers that I'd finally be moving into Meadowbrook Assisted Living was that I owned the entire chain of 17 storage facilities across Arizona, including the one where he secretly kept his sports car collection. The facilities were worth $190 million. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Thomas Mitchell. Everyone calls me Tom. I turned 69 last October, and I just finished 50 years as a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service in Mesa, Arizona. Not a supervisor, not a manager, just a regular carrier walking the same routes I'd walked since 1975. I still wore the same style of uniform, still drove the same type of mail truck, and still lived in a 1982 single-wide mobile home in Desert Vista Mobile Park that I'd bought for $9,000. My daughter Rachel had insisted on throwing this anniversary party. She'd rented out the community room at the post office, invited everyone I'd worked with over the decades, ordered sheet cakes from Costco, and strung up a banner that said, 50 years of service. "Dad, please," she'd said 3 weeks earlier, sitting at my tiny Formica kitchen table. "You've dedicated your whole life to this job. People want to celebrate you." The kitchen table had chrome legs and a yellow top with little boomerang patterns on it. Original from 1982. The whole trailer was like that. I hadn't changed much since I'd bought it. Same brown paneling, same Harvest Gold appliances, same burnt orange carpet. People thought it was sad. Tom still lives like it's 1982. I'd heard more than once. But everything worked. Everything was paid for. And I liked it that way. I'd bought the mobile home right after my wife Diane passed from ovarian cancer. We'd been married for 11 years. We had Rachel when Diane was 41, and I was 38. Rachel was only 9 when her mother died. I was 47 years old, suddenly a single father with a mortgage on a house I couldn't afford emotionally to stay in. Every room reminded me of Diane. So I sold that house in Tempe for $42,000 and bought the mobile home for $9,000. Paid cash. No mortgage. The mobile park was clean, had a small pool, and was 10 minutes from my mail route. Rachel had her own bedroom, which was all that mattered. People thought I was crazy. "You're a postal worker, Tom," my supervisor had said. "You could afford a real house." But I didn't want a real house. I wanted simplicity. I wanted to focus on raising Rachel and doing my job well. I wanted to save money for Rachel's future. What nobody knew was that my father, Harold Mitchell, had been quietly wealthy. He'd owned a small manufacturing company in Detroit that made industrial fasteners. Boring stuff. Nuts, bolts, screws for factories. He'd lived modestly his whole life. Drove a Chevrolet, wore JCPenney clothes. When he died in 1998, 2 years after Diane, he left me everything. The company had gone public in 1987. His shares were worth $37 million. I was 50 years old, still delivering mail, living in my mobile home with my teenage daughter. And suddenly I had $37 million. I didn't tell anyone, not even Rachel, who was 17 and applying to colleges. I wanted her to understand the value of work, to make her own way. So I kept delivering mail. I kept living in my trailer. I took my father's money and hired a financial manager from Phoenix, who didn't know me personally. We diversified. Real estate seemed smart. Arizona was growing. Over 20 years, I'd built a portfolio. Storage facilities, specifically. People always need storage. I started with one facility in 2000, bought 3 more by 2005, and kept expanding. By 2024, I owned 17 facilities across the Phoenix metro area, Desert Storage Solutions. The company name was bland on purpose. I was listed as owner through a holding company. Nobody connected it to Tom Mitchell, the mailman. The properties generated $7 million a year in revenue. After expenses, I cleared about $4 million annually. I lived on my postal salary of $58,000 a year and gave away or reinvested everything else. Scholarships for postal workers' kids, donations to cancer research, anonymous gifts to families I'd met on my route who were struggling. I was content. I had my routine, my trailer, my route. I drove a 1,000 997 Honda Accord with 237,000 miles on it. I wore the same style of Wrangler jeans I'd bought for 20 years. I got my hair cut at the barber shop on Main Street for $15. I was happy. Then Rachel met Jeffrey. That was 4 years ago. She was 44, working as an emergency room nurse at Banner Gateway Medical Center. She'd been through a painful divorce in her late 30s. No kids from that marriage. I'd worried about her being alone, throwing herself into those brutal ER shifts. So when she called me excited about meeting someone, I was genuinely happy for her. Jeffrey Caldwell, 39, financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. He wore suits that probably cost more than my monthly lot rent. He drove a Tesla Model S. He lived in a 4-bedroom house in Scottsdale with a pool and a 3-car garage. He had opinions about wine vintages and talked about investment portfolios the way I talked about which streets had the meanest dogs. Our first meeting was at a restaurant in Scottsdale, one of those places with valet parking and menus that don't list prices. They just say market price next to the fish. "So, Tom," Jeffrey had said, swirling something red in an oversized wine glass. "Rachel tells me you're with the post office. That's terrific. Government pension. Can't beat that stability." "Mail carrier," I'd said. "Same route for 32 years now." "Wow." He'd nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something disappointing. "That's real dedication." My dad was military, same kind of mindset. Routine, structure. There was something in his tone. Nothing I could point to directly, but it was there. Like he was filing me into a category. Simple man, simple life, simple mind. Rachel had jumped in. "Dad's customers love him. Some of them have known him for decades." "I'm sure they do," Jeffrey had smiled. "So where do you live, Tom?" Rachel's been a bit vague about that. Desert Vista Mobile Park. About 10 minutes from my route. A mobile home park. His eyebrows had gone up slightly. "Is that the one off University Drive?" "That's it." "Huh." He'd taken a sip of wine. "That's an interesting choice. Have you thought about buying something? Home prices in Mesa are very reasonable compared to Scottsdale. I could connect you with a good real estate agent." "I own my home," I'd said. "It's paid off. No mortgage." "Right. But I mean a real house. An asset that appreciates. Mobile homes depreciate like cars, Tom. You're basically throwing money away on lot rent every month." Rachel had looked uncomfortable. "Dad likes where he lives. It works for him." Of course. Of course. Jeffrey had held up his hands like he was backing off, but then continued anyway. "I just think, at this stage of life, you want to build equity, not pay rent. But hey, if you're happy, that's what matters." That was the first time I felt it. This subtle condescension. This assumption that I didn't understand basic financial concepts. That my choices were made out of ignorance rather than intention. They got engaged 8 months later. I was happy for Rachel. I really was. She seemed to glow around him, at least in those early days. The wedding was at some resort in Sedona, 150 guests. I wore my only suit, the same one I'd worn to my wedding with Diane in 1966. It still fit. I'd taken good care of it. Jeffrey's parents were there. Richard and Constance Caldwell. Richard was a retired orthodontist. Constance came from old money. Phoenix old money. The kind of family that had bought land in the valley in the 1922 when it was all farms. Constance had looked at my suit with barely hidden distaste. "How vintage," she'd said. "Is that from an estate sale?" "It's from 1966, I'd told her. "My wedding suit." "Oh my!" She'd touched her pearl necklace. "Well, you've certainly gotten your money's worth from it." The wedding was nice. Expensive. I'd offered to help pay, but Jeffrey had waved me off. "We've got it handled, Tom. You just enjoy yourself." I'd given them a gift I'd spent 2 months making. A jewelry box, mesquite wood, with hidden compartments and dovetail joints. I'd learned woodworking from YouTube videos and had set up a small workshop in my storage shed. The box had taken 60 hours of work, and I'd finished it with tung oil until it glowed. Constance had opened it at the gift table. "How rustic," she'd said to someone next to her, loud enough for me to hear. I suppose it's the thought that counts. Jeffrey had actually seemed pleased for a moment. This is really well made, Tom. You did this yourself? I did. Impressive. He'd studied the dovetails. Must have taken a while. About 2 months. Well, he'd paused. Thank you. We'll definitely use this. I later learned from Rachel they'd put it in their garage. Jeffrey thought it didn't match the aesthetic of their bedroom. The first year of their marriage was fine. I didn't see them much. They were busy with their life in Scottsdale. I was busy with my route and my woodworking. Rachel called me every Sunday morning at 8. We'd talk about her shifts at the hospital, about my customers, about nothing in particular. Then things started to shift. It began with small comments. Rachel would mention that Jeffrey thought I should upgrade my living situation. Dad, he's just worried about you, she'd say. You're almost 70. What if something happens in that trailer? I'm 66, not 90, and I have a medical alert system. But Jeffrey says mobile homes aren't safe in our heat. The cooling systems fail. People die. My AC works fine. I maintain it. But Jeffrey kept pushing. Every visit, he'd notice something. The siding on my trailer was faded. The awning was torn. My car was a death trap. The whole mobile park was sketchy. Tom, you really should think about moving, he'd said during one visit. There are some nice senior communities in Mesa, 55 and older, activities, security, support if you need it. I don't need support. I'm still working full-time. But you're retiring soon, right? You've got to be thinking about that. I'm thinking about it. When you do retire, what's the plan? You can't maintain that trailer forever. You're on a fixed income. My pension will be fine, but it's not going to be much, Tom. Postal pensions are decent, but combined with lot rent, utilities, healthcare costs as you age, it's going to be tight. You need to be realistic. Realistic. Like I was a child who didn't understand money. The real problem started about 8 months ago. Jeffrey's mother, Constance, had become involved with a company that managed upscale assisted living facilities. Meadowbrook Senior Living. 5 facilities across the Phoenix area. They weren't cheap, starting at $6,000 a month for a studio apartment. Jeffrey had started bringing it up constantly. Mom showed me the Meadowbrook facility in Tempe, he'd say. It's actually really nice, Tom. They have activities, 3 meals a day, housekeeping, transportation to medical appointments. I don't need any of that, but you will eventually. And there's a waiting list. It's better to get on the list now. I'm not getting on any list. I'm happy where I am. Tom, I'm looking at this from a financial planning perspective. You're going to run out of money if you keep paying lot rent. Your trailer is worthless. You can't sell it for anything. Meanwhile, these assisted living places include everything. No surprise costs. At $6,000 a month, which is actually reasonable for what you get. And honestly, with your pension and Social Security, you'd need some family help. Rachel and I have talked about it. We're willing to contribute. That's when I'd realized what this really was. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about their perception of me. An almost 70-year-old mail carrier living in a rundown trailer in a mobile home park didn't fit the image Jeffrey wanted to project. And maybe, though I hated to think it, they were worried about money. Rachel would inherit whatever I had when I died. From Jeffrey's perspective, that was a paid-off mobile home worth maybe $5,000 and whatever was left in my checking account. He probably saw it as nothing. But if they could get me into assisted living, control my finances, maybe there was something to manage, some small estate to preserve. I'd asked Rachel about it gently one evening when she'd stopped by alone. Honey, why is Jeffrey so focused on me moving? She'd sighed. Dad, he's not trying to control you. He's trying to help. You're getting older. That trailer is falling apart. We worry. I maintain everything. The AC works, the plumbing works, the roof is solid. But for how much longer? And what happens when you can't do maintenance anymore? What happens when you can't drive to get groceries? Then I'll figure it out. But I'm not there yet. Jeffrey thinks you're in denial about aging. Jeffrey doesn't know me. She'd looked hurt. He's my husband, Dad. He cares about you. But I wasn't sure he did. I wasn't sure he cared about anything except appearances and control. 3 months ago, Jeffrey had shown up at my trailer with a real estate agent. I was in my postal uniform, just gotten home from my route. There was a woman in a business suit standing next to Jeffrey in my carport. "Tom, this is Brenda. She specializes in mobile home sales. I thought you might want to hear what your place could sell for." I'd stood there in my shorts and postal shirt, my feet hurting from 8 hours of walking. I didn't ask for this. I know, but knowledge is power, right? Let Brenda take a look. Brenda had walked around my trailer with a clipboard, taking notes. She'd looked at the skirting, the roof, the windows, given the age and condition, and factoring in the lot rent costs. I'd estimate 9 to 11,000 for a quick sale. Maybe 13, if you find the right buyer, and are willing to wait. Jeffrey had nodded like this proved his point. "See, you've been paying lot rent for 42 years. At $350 a month, that's almost $180,000 spent. If you'd bought a real house 40 years ago, it would be worth $500,000 now. Get off my property," I'd said quietly. "Tom, I'm trying to help you understand the financial reality here. Both of you." Now, Brenda had left quickly. Jeffrey had stood there looking confused. "I don't understand why you're being so defensive. This is about your future. This is about you making decisions for me without my permission. I didn't ask for your help. I don't want your help. This is my home. It's a deteriorating asset in a sketchy park. You're being stubborn. And you're being condescending. Leave." He'd left, but not before saying, "Rachel's worried sick about you, Tom. This isn't just about me." Rachel had called that night in tears. "Why were you so rude to Jeffrey? He was trying to help. He brought a stranger to value my home without asking me. Because you won't listen to reason. Dad, that trailer isn't safe. You're getting older. We just want you taken care of." "I'm taking care of myself. But what if something happens? What if you fall? What if your AC breaks in July and you die of heat stroke before anyone finds you? Then something happens. That's life. That's not fair to me. I can't lose you like I lost Mom." That had hit hard. But I'd stayed firm. "I'm not moving to an assisted living facility." End of discussion. We'd barely spoken after that. She'd called a few times, but the conversations were strained. She was caught between her husband and her father, and I hated that I'd put her in that position. But I wasn't going to let Jeffrey make my decisions for me. Then 6 weeks ago, Rachel had called with the anniversary party idea. "Dad, please. 50 years at the post office is a huge deal. Let us celebrate you properly. I'll handle everything." I'd agreed because I missed my daughter. And because I thought maybe in a public setting, with my coworkers there, Jeffrey might drop this whole assisted living campaign. I should have known better. The party was nice. Really nice. The community room at the main post office was decorated with blue and white streamers. Rachel had made a slideshow with photos from my 50 years of service. Pictures of me in my 20s, my hair dark, standing next to my mail truck. Pictures from the 80s with my mustache. Pictures from just last year, my hair white now, but still wearing the uniform. 60 people showed up. Mail carriers I'd worked with for decades. Supervisors, both current and retired. Customers from my route who'd become friends. Mrs. Chen, who'd been getting mail from me for 48 years. The Rodriguez family, whose kids I'd watched grow up. Mr. Harrison, who'd been on my route since 1987 and always left me bottles of water in his mailbox during summer. People told stories. About the time I'd delivered mail during the haboob of 2011, couldn't see 10 feet, but finished my route anyway. About how I'd helped Mrs. Peterson get her Social Security check when the system glitched. About the Christmas cards I'd received from customers over the years, hundreds of them, thanking me for being reliable, friendly, part of their daily routine. Someone had made a video compilation. Former customers who'd moved away sending messages. "Mr. Tom was the best part of my childhood," one said. "Every day, at 3:15, rain or shine, there he was." Another. "When my husband died, Tom checked on me every day for months. Not just delivering mail, actually checking that I was okay." I'd gotten emotional. These people, these relationships, this had been my life's work. Not glamorous, not prestigious, but real, meaningful. Then Jeffrey had stood up. He'd waited until everyone had finished eating their cake, until the room was in that comfortable lull of conversation. He'd tapped his fork against his plastic cup, until people quieted down. "If I could have everyone's attention," he'd said, smiling, "I'd like to say a few words about my father-in-law, Tom." Rachel had looked surprised. She hadn't known he was planning to speak. "Tom Mitchell," Jeffrey had begun, "is a man who represents the backbone of America. 50 years of service, 50 years of showing up, rain or shine, delivering mail to people who depend on him. A humble man who's never asked for much." People had nodded, smiling. "But as we all know," Jeffrey had continued, "time catches up with all of us. Tom is 69 years old now. He's been living alone in a mobile home in conditions that, frankly, aren't suitable for someone his age. We've been worried about his safety. The isolation, the lack of support. I'd felt my chest tighten. Rachel and I have tried to talk to Tom about better living arrangements, but he's been resistant. He's proud. I get it. But pride can be dangerous." The room had gotten quiet, uncomfortable. "So tonight, along with celebrating Tom's incredible career, I'm also pleased to announce that we've found a solution. My mother, Constance Caldwell, sits on the board of Meadowbrook Senior Living. She's secured a spot for Tom at their Tempe location. Beautiful facility, everything he needs, medical staff on site. He'll be moving in at the end of next month." The room had gone silent. "We've already started the paperwork," Jeffrey had continued, like this was good news. "His mobile home will be listed for sale, and the proceeds plus his pension will cover most of the costs. Rachel and I will make up the difference because family takes care of family." He'd raised his plastic cup to Tom, and to finally getting him somewhere safe and appropriate for his golden years. Nobody had raised their cups. The silence was deafening. I'd stood up slowly. Every eye in the room was on me. I could see my coworkers looking shocked, Mrs. Chen with her hand over her mouth, Mr. Harrison with his jaw set, angry. "Jeffrey," I'd said quietly, "what makes you think I'm selling my home?" He'd smiled like I was a confused old man who'd forgotten the plan. "Tom, we've discussed this multiple times. It's what's best for you. We've discussed you wanting me to sell. I never agreed. But you can't keep living in that trailer. It's not safe. Everyone here knows I'm right. You can't maintain a home at your age. You need support, supervision." That's when Mr. Harrison had stood up in the back of the room. "Jeffrey, do you know who Tom is?" Jeffrey had looked confused. "He's my father-in-law. He's a mail carrier. For 50 years, Mr. Harrison had said. "And do you know what else he's been doing for the past 24 years? "I don't know what you mean." Mr. Harrison had walked forward. He was 78, retired now, but he'd been vice president at Desert Trust Bank until 2015. "I've been Tom's banker since 2000. Well, one of his bankers. His primary wealth manager is out of Phoenix, but I handle some of his local transactions." The room had started to murmur. Jeffrey had paled slightly. "What transactions?" "Property acquisitions, mostly. Tom's been buying storage facilities since 2000. Another voice. "Susan Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter, now a commercial real estate attorney in Phoenix." "Wait, Mr. Mitchell, are you TSM Holdings?" I'd taken a breath. This wasn't how I'd wanted this to come out, ever. "Yes," I'd said quietly. The room had erupted in whispers. Jeffrey had stammered. "But that's the largest storage facility operator in the Phoenix metro area." Susan had nodded, pulling out her phone. 17 facilities. I've worked on leases for 2 of them. The owner is listed as TSM Holdings, registered agent Thomas S. Mitchell. I've never made the connection. Thomas Stanley Mitchell, Mr. Harrison had added. Total property value approximately $190 million. Annual revenue around $7 million. Tom's been one of our bank's largest depositors for 2 decades. Every face in the room had turned to me. Jeffrey looked like he might faint. "That can't be right. You're a mail carrier. You live in a trailer." "A mobile home I bought in 1982 for $9,000, I'd said, "that I chose to live in, that I maintained and paid for, while I built a business." Rachel had sat down hard in her chair, her face white. "My father died in 1998, I'd continued. Left me $37 million from his manufacturing company. I was 50 years old, had a teenage daughter to raise, and a job I loved. So I kept working, kept living simply, and invested the money. Real estate seemed smart. Arizona was growing. People always need storage. I'd look directly at Jeffrey. So, when you talk about me running out of money, about needing family support to afford $6,000 a month at your mother's facility, you should know that I could buy Meadowbrook's entire chain and not notice the money missing. The room was utterly silent. But I won't, I'd continued, because I don't need to prove anything. I don't need a big house or an expensive car or the right zip code. I have a home I've lived in for 42 years. I have a job that's given me purpose and connection to hundreds of families. I have a life I chose. I turned to Rachel. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted you to be proud of me for being a good mail carrier, a good father, not for having money. I wanted our relationship to be real, not complicated by wealth. She'd started crying. And I wanted you to understand what my father taught me, I'd said. That money is a tool, not an identity. I've given away millions to scholarships, to cancer research, to families on my route who were struggling, anonymously. Because the point isn't recognition. The point is helping. I looked at Jeffrey. You assumed I was poor because I lived modestly. You assumed I was incompetent because I'm old. You decided my life needed fixing without ever asking me what I wanted or who I was. You made announcements about my future without my consent because you couldn't imagine someone choosing simplicity. Jeffrey had tried to speak. Tom, I had no idea. No, you didn't, because you never asked. You saw an old man in a uniform living in a trailer and assumed you knew everything about me. Assumed I needed to be managed. I'd addressed the room. I've been delivering mail for 50 years because I believe in service, because I like walking my route, knowing my customers, being part of their lives. The money I've made from storage facilities has let me help hundreds of people. Postal workers' kids going to college on scholarships they don't know I funded. Families keeping their homes when they hit hard times, with anonymous help they never traced back to me. I'd picked up my plastic cup of punch. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for 50 wonderful years. Thank you for every family that trusted me with their mail, their packages, their small daily kindnesses. And Jeffrey, I'd looked at him directly. I'm not selling my home. I'm not moving to assisted living. I'm living exactly the way I want to live. And when I die, Rachel will inherit everything, including TSM Holdings and every property it owns. The room had erupted in applause. Real, sustained applause. Jeffrey had stood there looking like the floor had disappeared beneath him. Constance had already left the room. Richard had followed her. Rachel had come to me, wrapped her arms around me, and sobbed into my shoulder. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay, sweetheart. It's not. I didn't trust you. I let Jeffrey convince me you needed help when you were doing fine. You were trying to take care of me. That's what good daughters do. Jeffrey had approached slowly. Tom, I don't know what to say. You could start with an apology. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I completely misread everything. You judged me by appearances, by assumptions. You decided who I was without ever really getting to know me. I know. I was wrong. I'd looked at him for a long moment. He looked genuinely shaken. Jeffrey, I don't need you to understand my choices, but I need you to respect them. And I need you to respect Rachel. She's not a problem you need to solve. Neither am I. He'd nodded. I understand. I really do. I was arrogant. I was wrong. Rachel had looked between us. Dad, can we go see your place? Really see it? Not with judgment. I want to understand. I'd like that. We'd left the party early. Rachel had ridden with me in my Honda. Jeffrey had driven himself back to Scottsdale alone. We didn't talk much on the drive. She just sat next to me, looking out the window at the familiar streets of Mesa. When we'd arrived at Desert Vista Mobile Park, I'd unlocked my trailer and turned on the lights. The old brown paneling, the harvest gold stove, the boomerang Formica table. Dad, she'd said softly, it's exactly the same. I like it this way. It reminds me of when you were young, when your mom was alive. She'd walked through slowly, running her hands over the walls, the furniture. She'd stopped at a photo of Diane, young and smiling, holding baby Rachel. "I barely remember her," Rachel had said. "You were 9 when she passed. But you're so much like her. She would be so proud of you." She'd started crying again. "I feel like I've been so focused on what I thought you needed that I forgot to ask what you wanted." "You haven't forgotten anything. We're here now. But why didn't you tell me about the money? Why let me worry about you?" "Because I wanted you to know me as your father, not as a bank account. And I wanted to teach you what my father taught me, that how you live matters more than what you own." She'd looked around the trailer. "You really are happy here." "I really am. I know every neighbor. I swim in the pool. I have my workshop in the back. I walk to the post office. It's my life, Rachel, the life I chose. And you're safe. You're healthy." "I am. I have a full medical screening every year. I walk 8 to 10 miles a day on my route. I'm in better shape than most 50-year-olds. She'd smiled through her tears. "Of course you are." We'd talked until midnight. About her childhood, about my mail route, about the storage facilities and how I'd built that business while still delivering mail every day. About the charities I supported and the families I'd helped anonymously over the years. "What are you going to do about Jeffrey?" I'd asked finally. She'd been quiet for a long time. "I don't know. Part of me is so angry I can barely breathe. But part of me understands he grew up in a world where appearances are everything. He genuinely couldn't comprehend someone choosing to live differently. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. But Dad, I love him. Despite tonight, despite everything, I love him. He's kind to me. He supports my career. He just couldn't see past his assumptions about you." "Can he change?" "I don't know. But I'm going to find out. Because I'm not losing you again. Not for anyone." She'd stayed the night in the guest bedroom, the same bedroom she'd grown up in. In the morning, I'd made coffee and we'd sat outside on my little patio, watching the sun come up over the Superstition Mountains. Jeffrey had called her around 9. She'd talked to him for over an hour, walking around the mobile park. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her gesturing, crying, listening. When she'd come back, she'd said, "He wants to apologize. Really apologize. Just you and him, no audience." "All right." He'd driven over that afternoon. He'd looked terrible, like he hadn't slept. When he'd gotten out of his Tesla in front of my trailer, he'd just stood there for a moment, looking at my home, really looking at it for the first time. "I'm an idiot," he'd said. "Yes, you were. I thought I was helping. I thought you were too proud to ask for assistance." "I didn't need assistance, Jeffrey. I needed respect. I know that now." He'd looked at me directly. "Tom, I'm truly sorry. For the assumptions, for the disrespect, for trying to control something that wasn't mine to control, for embarrassing you in front of your coworkers, for everything." I'd studied him. He looked genuinely remorseful. Whether it would last, I didn't know. But people deserve a chance to grow. "Apology accepted," I'd said. "On one condition." "Anything." "Stop assuming you know better than other people about how they should live. Stop judging people by their address, or their car, or their clothes. And remember that there are many ways to live a good life. Yours isn't the only one." He'd nodded. "I will. I promise." Rachel had been watching from my patio. She'd come down, taken Jeffrey's hand. "Dad's going to teach us about his business," she'd said. "Both of us. I want to understand what you've built." Jeffrey had looked surprised. "Really? If you're interested," I'd said. "I am. I really am. And Tom, I want to learn from you, not just about business, but about living, about what actually matters." And so, that's what we did. Every Sunday afternoon, Jeffrey and Rachel would drive over to Desert Vista. I'd show them the spreadsheets, the property reports, explain how I'd chosen locations, how I'd financed expansions. But more than that, we'd talk about philosophy, about purpose, about building a life that means something beyond its price tag. Jeffrey started changing, slowly. He traded his Tesla for a used Toyota. He started volunteering at a financial literacy program for low-income families. He wasn't perfect. He still cared too much about appearances sometimes, but he was trying. 8 months later, On my 70th birthday, they gave me a gift. Jeffrey had taken woodworking classes and built a small box, mesquite wood like the one I'd made them. It was imperfect, the joints not quite right, but honest. "I made this," he'd said, "with my own hands. And I finally understand why you do it, why you build things, why you deliver mail. It's not about the outcome, it's about the work itself." I'd been moved to tears. I'm still living in my 1982 mobile home in Desert Vista Mobile Park. I'm still driving my Honda Accord. I retired from the post office last month after 50 years and 2 months of service. They threw me another party, and this time Jeffrey gave a speech about humility and learning to see people for who they really are. I still own Desert Storage Solutions, 17 facilities, now worth $212 million. I'm still giving most of the revenue away to scholarships and causes I believe in. Rachel and Jeffrey now help me choose which organizations to support. Rachel understands now why I lived the way I did. Not because I had to, but because this is who I am. The mobile home in Desert Vista isn't a compromise or a stepping stone. It's my home, filled with memories of raising my daughter, of building a life that matters. And that, I've learned, is worth more than any mansion in Scottsdale. Though I'll admit, seeing Jeffrey's face when he realized I held the mortgage on his house through one of my holding companies, that was pretty satisfying too.